Did you know dark skin is found in every indigenous population located between the two tropics? Whether it's in Asia, Africa, or Oceania, traits like dark skin, a wide nose, and kinky or tightly curled hair appears across populations that actually belong to very distinct genetic lineages. Africa itself contains the highest genetic diversity in the world. Even if all human population outside Africa went extinct and only the Khoisan people remained, global human genetic diversity will still retain roughly 90% of what exists today. But despite this deep genetic diversity, populations that could be genetically separated since the late Pleistocene still develop phenotypes that could be hard to distinguish to the untrained eye. This is due to convergent evolution combined with Africa's extreme genetic richness, which stabilizes shared ancestral tropical traits across multiple lineages. Traits such as dark skin and softer facial features persist because they are responding to similar environmental pressures. That similarity is what historically led tropical Africans to be labeled as quote-unquote black, but tropical Africans are not the only one. Tropical Asians and Oceanians also share many of these traits. However, indigenous dark-skinned tropical Asian population lost the demographic battle with North and light-skinned farmer populations. That's why the tropical part of Asia is not associated with these indigenous dark-skinned people. But having dark skin, aka blackness, is not just a label. It is the reason humans were able to successfully inhabit the tropics, and also the reason why nearly half of the global human population carries dark skin pigmentation today. In my previous video, I talked about the existing indigenous African lineages, but in this video, I'm going to discuss global blackness, why tropical features exist, and also explore the hidden and mostly unknown dark skin populations outside Africa. So, let's begin. But first, I have an important announcement. Black people, due to the Eurocentric social construct that most people of the world have inherited, are often treated synonymous with African people. But Africa is not a monolith. The continent is extraordinarily rich in human diversity, yet that diversity rarely receives the attention it deserves. That is one of the reasons why I wrote my book, World Encyclopedia of African Peoples. It is a book where I discuss all African ethnic groups, their mixed descendants, and their global diaspora around the world. In each chapter, I explore their genetic and ancestral backgrounds, history and migrations, geographic distribution, phenotypic traits, languages and communication, traditional lifestyles and economies, cultural traits and customs, modern identity and diasporas, and much more in each and every African group. It's an eye-opening read full of knowledge and one of the best ways to discover your African brethren, a topic that is not discussed much in popular academia. The book is available on Amazon and is the best way to support my channel. The link and more details are in description. Now, let's continue with the topic of blackness. What is blackness? Blackness is not a race. It's a sign that your ancestors never left the tropics, with the main biological criterion of dark skin pigmentation, typically ranging from about 28 to 36 on the Lucian scale, in which I discussed in a previous video. It is a trait that protects the skin from harsh UV radiation to prevent skin cancer, and also folate, aka vitamin B9, from being destroyed by the sun during pregnancies. But blackness is also associated with soft features such as full lips, a wide-set nose, and tightly coiled hair, although these traits vary significantly from population to population. However, there are some outliers. For example, dark-skinned indigenous Indians with high AASI ancestry and Australian Aboriginal peoples often have hair ranging from wavy to loosely curled instead of tightly coiled. The reason many tropical populations evolve tightly coiled hair is because it works like a natural cooling system. The curls lift the hair away from the scalp, allowing airflow and faster sweat evaporation, while the dense structure also protects the brain from intense vertical sunlight near the equator. In simple terms, tightly coiled hair acts like built-in ventilation and sun protection for hot and humid climates. But groups like the Aboriginal Australians and Indians follow different genetic paths. Variants in genes such as EDAR and TCHH become dominant through founder's effect and long isolation, producing straighter or wavier hair. But traits like dark skin and wide noses are strongly tied to survival in tropical environments and tend to remain stable. But hair texture is more genetically flexible and can vary even among populations living in similar climates. Still, their noses are usually wide. Because most tropical populations have wide noses because wider shorter nasal passages, aka platyri noses, help release heat and manage moisture in warm environments. This increases evaporative cooling and help regulate blood temperature before it reaches the brain. Wide nostrils also allow higher airflow with less resistance, which is useful in consistently hot climates. However, the environment matters. Dark-skinned populations in desert regions of the Horn of Africa and the Middle East sometimes have narrower noses, even though they still retain dark skin and curly hair. That's because dry climates create a different challenge, humidifying dusty air. Narrower passages create turbulence that add moisture before air reaches the lungs. This shows that humidity, not just temperature, plays a major role in shaping facial structure. Plus, they're either West Eurasian or part West Eurasian genetically, a racial group that evolved outside the tropics. But speaking of West Eurasians, let's start with the most underrated dark-skinned West Eurasian people in the world, the modern South Arabians. Modern South Arabians are the last living genetically West Eurasian population to retain dark skin pigmentation. They are found in Hadramaut, Al-Mahra and Socotra in eastern Yemen and also in the Dhofar region of western Oman. Those regions I mentioned are the only pockets in West Asia that have a tropical climate. The vegetation is different, the ecology is different, and so are the people. These populations were geographically and culturally isolated for millennia, and they are the only population that still retains strong genetic continuity from the Natufian or Arabian hunter-gatherers. Unlike neighboring Arab tribes who experienced later admixture from Anatolian and Zagrosian population. Because of that, they act as a genetic proxy to the more unmixed Natufian-related ancestry, preserving ancient West Eurasian traits like darker skin pigmentation that was largely lost in other West Eurasian groups after migrations into lower UV environments. This produces one of the most unique West Eurasian phenotype known as Proto-Arabid or Arabian Verdoid. But despite the naming similarity, they are not genetically related to the Verdoid population of South Asia, who are genetically East Eurasian. But South Asia is another continent known for having dark-skinned population. Eurocentric social constructs have labeled South Asians as brown people, even though many shades found there are no different from those in tropical Africa. The AASI, ancient ancestral South Indians, are the indigenous population of South Asia, living in the region roughly 50 to 60,000 years ago. With the highest preserved AASI ancestries today are found in indigenous tribal groups known as the Adivasi. However, the region experienced multiple waves of West Eurasian admixture, first from Zagrosian-related farmers during the Neolithic, and later from steppe pastoralists during the Bronze Age, often associated with Indo-Aryan expansion. But outside of northwest India and Pakistan, the majority of South Asians still have dark skin due to high AASI ancestry combined with local adaptation to local high UV tropical environments. This produces diverse dark skin phenotypes across the subcontinent from north to south. They include the Verdoid, which has the Vedas of Sri Lanka, who developed the Veda phenotype. They are the most indigenous population of the island of Sri Lanka. In North India, we have the North Gondid phenotype, found among groups like the Gond, Kuruk, Bul, Juang, and Baiga. In Central and Eastern region, we have the South Gondid phenotype, found among Muria, Mardia, and Koi population. And lastly, along the South Indian coast, we have the Malid phenotype, common in isolated forest groups like the Kanikaran, Kadar, and Pania. The people I mentioned are often labeled as Indian tribal groups or Adivasi. and are largely hidden in mainstream Indian media because they are found outside the caste system and are labeled as quote-unquote Dalits, but genetically they represent some of the most indigenous population of the region. But the demographic of dark-skinned South Asians is even larger when we consider the ASI, who mixed with Zagrossian populations in the Neolithic, in which brought Dravidian people and languages and created additional dark-skinned phenotypes across South Asia. They include the Kanakatid, the phenotype commonly associated with Tamil populations of Sri Lanka and South India. In the north, we have the Kolid phenotype, probably the most demographically dominant phenotype in India, found in diverse Indian groups in Jharkhand and West Bengal. And lastly, we have the Malabrese phenotype, common among the Malabar populations of southwest India. Moving towards Southeast Asia, we reach the Andaman Islands, home to the Andamanese people, who are among the darkest skinned population outside Africa. Genetically, they are an ancient East Eurasian group who remain extremely isolated and preserved an early tropical East Eurasian phenotype that existed before the development of later East Asian facial features associated with northern climates. They fall into two main phenotypic clusters, such as Northern Andamanid, found among Great Andamanese groups, especially in the northern and central, and then we have the Southern Andamanid, common among the Onge, Jarawa, and the famous Sentinelese. This phenotype is the most well-preserved Andamanese phenotype. Moving to the Southeast Asian mainland, we encounter indigenous Southeast Asians, historically labeled by Spanish colonizers as quote-unquote negrito, meaning little black people, which is a derogatory colonial term. Europeans misidentified them as Africans due to stereotypes that equated dark skin with African origin and also brown skin with Indian origin, classifying unrelated people based on appearance rather than ancestry. But these populations predate the arrival of Austronesian, Austroasiatic, and Taika and have lived in Southeast Asia for over 50,000 years. They include groups such as the Semang, Batek, and Jahai, collectively known in Malaysia as the Orang Asli, forming what is called the Semangid phenotype. Moving to the islands of Southeast Asia, particularly the Philippines, we find groups like the Aeta, Ati, Batak, and Mamanwa, forming the Aetid phenotype. Both of these indigenous Southeast Asian populations exist in very small numbers today and face serious risk of cultural and genetic extinction as unmixed groups. But when we move to Oceania, we see a major demographic contrast between Melanesian agricultural populations and Australian hunter-gatherers. Let's start with the numerically dominant Melanesians, the black African lookalikes of Oceania. The name Melanesia comes from the Greek melas meaning black and nesos meaning island, Black Island. These populations likely arrived during the Pleistocene epoch roughly 50 to 65,000 years ago. They represent one of the most ethnically diverse human population, inhabiting a territory comparable in size to France, Spain, or Kenya. They are often mistaken for sub-Saharan Africans at first glance, but closer observation reveals distinct differences in facial structure, hair variation, and genetic ancestry. Genetically, they are East Eurasian population with significant Denisovan admixture, and come in diverse phenotypic clusters, such as Insular Melanesid, common in East Papua, New Britain, New Ireland, Admiralty Island, Eastern Solomon Island, Nendo, Banks Island, and Vanuatu. This phenotype produces the famous Melanesian blonde/ginger hair trait. In Papua New Guinea, we have the Neo-Melanesid, a unique Papuan phenotype, common in lowland and river populations, with high concentration in southern regions. In the highlands of Papua New Guinea, we have the mountain Melanesid, common among New Guinea highlanders such as the Dani, Moni, Ekagi, Mbawamb, Enga, Banyani, Yali, and others. These three phenotypes I mentioned are not usually dark-skinned because it has a sizable minority of light to fair-skinned individuals, but the rest are true melos, such as the tiny tapirid phenotype. The shortest Melanesian group, sometimes called Melanesian pygmies, it including populations such as the Peseshem, Goliath, Ayome, Afere, Baining, Mafulu, Kimyal, Mek, Ketengbang, Una, and the extinct Tapiro. The next one is the Bukite phenotype. It is the darkest Melanesian phenotype, dominant in Western Solomons, Bougainville, and Nisan. Another one is Paleo-Melanesid. It is a unique Melanesian phenotype with some Australian Aboriginal traits, commonly found among the Kanak of New Caledonia. And lastly, we have a mixed phenotype, the Fijid. It is a Polynesian-Melanesian contact type, the dominant type in the population of the Fiji Islands. Finally, we move to the land down under, Australia, home to the Aboriginal Australians, aka Blackfellas. This population represent one of the deepest branches of the East Eurasian lineage. They share distant ancestry with ASI population but was separated for roughly 50,000 years ago, and also carry some of the highest Denisovan ancestry known. They were mostly hunter-gatherers and could not demographically resist European ethnic cleansing, unlike their agricultural Melanesian neighbors. However, they developed diverse regional phenotypes, such as North Australid. This is the darkest type, which is well adapted to the tropical north of Australia, in places like Arnhem Land and Gulf of Carpentaria, with a stable and mixed population. Unlike the South Australid, historically the most numerous, now nearly extinct in unmixed form, typical among Wiradjuri, Narunga, Wirango, and other southern tribes. In the center outback, we have the desert Australid. This phenotype is well adapted to the Australian outback, and it is found in groups like the Nganyatjara, Pintupi, and Pijanjantara, which is still relatively common due to late contact with Europeans, and it is known for occasional blonde/ginger hair traits. And then we have the extinct Australian phenotypes, such as the Barinian, a short rainforest adapted population of Queensland, already nearly gone in the 1900s after displacement by other Aboriginal groups and Europeans. And in Tasmania, we have the Tasmanid, isolated after Tasmania separated from mainland Australia, completely extinct in full-blooded form by the late 19th century due to colonization, warfare, displacement, and diseases, with some mixed descendants remaining today. This was the only Aboriginal phenotype known to commonly produce tightly coiled or kinky afro hair. And there you have it, guys. What do you think? If you want to know more about African people and their tropical adapted phenotype, check out my previous video. And if you want to dig deeper, check out my book, which is available on Amazon. And as always, stay curious, stay smart, and thank you very much for watching.